In this lesson, we are going to get to know SketchUp by moving through a fun obstacle course. To move through each station of this course, you'll need to check out the Scenes panel over here on the right. It's this icon here. You can see that we're starting at Station 1, and when it's time to move on to Station 2, you'll need to click on this icon, this little thumbnail, next to Station 2, Station 3, and so on. But again, we're going to start at Station 1, which is the starting point of our obstacle course. I don't need the Scenes panel right now, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of it by clicking on this X here. In the future, we will open it up again by clicking here, but like I said, we're going to keep it closed for now. So first up at Station 1, we are going to learn how to orbit, pan, and zoom. I like to call this getting your SketchUp driver's license, because it will help you drive or move through and around your 3D model. Before we talk about those tools, I want to note that the default tool when you open SketchUp is going to be your Select tool. And as I move my cursor around the screen, you'll notice an arrow is active, and that is my Select tool. You can get there by tapping your spacebar or this icon here. And this does exactly what it says. It allows you to select things. So as I click on the schoolhouse, you can see that its edges turn blue, has a blue bounding box. If I click on our scale figure, Katherine Johnson, her edges turn blue and she also has a blue bounding box, and so on. So we'll talk about the functions of the Select tool in the next station, but I like to think of this as the safest tool to have active. There's not a lot that we can do damage-wise to our 3D model. I won't unintentionally wreck something in my model just by simply selecting it. So this is the safest tool to have active. I like to tap my spacebar to activate this tool if I'm thinking about my next move when 3D modeling. So that is our Select tool. We'll talk about that later. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about how to drive around your model. And first up is the Orbit tool. This is going to allow us to spin our model around so that we can get a different view of it. There are a few different ways to get to this tool. If you happen to be using a mouse with a center scroll wheel, then you can click and hold that button in the middle. That center scroll wheel will act as a button. So go ahead and click and hold that down, and you'll notice that the Orbit tool becomes active. When you let go of it, the Select tool is active again. So go ahead and practice holding that center scroll wheel button down and moving your mouse, and you'll notice that the Orbit tool activates. If you don't have a mouse with a center scroll wheel, that's okay. You can use your trackpad as well. So to get to that, you can either use this icon here, or you can tap the letter O for Orbit. Now your Orbit tool is active, and you can click and drag with your trackpad and move it around. Or if you happen to have a mouse that doesn't have a center scroll wheel, you can use that in the same way. So either the letter O for Orbit or this icon here. So those are three different ways, either that center scroll wheel, using it as a button, the letter O for Orbit, or this icon here will allow you to orbit around your model. Click and drag to orbit all the way around. If you happen to get a sort of funky view of your model and you can't figure out how to get back, you can always open your Scenes panel again and click on the Station 1 thumbnail to bring us back to our original view. All right, go ahead and tap your spacebar to bring you back to the Select tool. Next, we'll talk about the Pan tool, and that's going to allow you to grab your drawing and move it side to side, up and down. So to activate the Pan tool, those of you with that center scroll wheel, you want to go ahead and press it down again. That activates your Orbit tool. But if you add the Shift key on your keyboard to that, that will allow you to use the Pan tool. You'll no longer be orbiting. You'll be grabbing your drawing and moving it side to side, up or down. So again, that center scroll wheel, hold it down like it's a button, and then add your Shift key on your keyboard, and that will activate the Pan tool. If you don't have a mouse or have a mouse with a center scroll wheel, that's okay. You can use your keyboard shortcut the letter H, and that activates the pan tool as well. Or this icon over here, your little hand. That allows you, again, side to side, up or down, all around. Pan tool. So go ahead and practice using that and pause the video as needed to make sure that you fully understand what this function does. All right, once you're done with that, you can hit your space bar to bring you back to the Select tool. Next up, we're going to talk about zooming. So that's going to, of course, allow you to zoom in or out. Again, mouse users with that center scroll wheel, you want to go ahead and practice rolling that forward or backwards, moving your cursor somewhere else, rolling it forward and backward, and getting used to zooming in and out. Again, if you don't have that center scroll wheel, that's okay. You can use your trackpad. So 2 fingers up brings you out. 2 fingers on that trackpad, just slide them across the trackpad, will help you zoom in. So practice doing that, move your cursor, and that allows you to choose your zoom point. So wherever your cursor is, that's where you're going to zoom in and out. Those of you that like using icons may go looking for the zoom icon, which is this guy, but it does function a little bit differently. So this little magnifying glass here, if you click and drag it, it will allow you to zoom in and out, but only on center. We don't get to choose our zoom point with this function. It just zooms in the center of your screen. So if you'd like to use this, you can orbit and zoom kind of as needed, but it does function a little bit differently than using your trackpad or that center scroll wheel. All right, so again, let's go ahead and tap the spacebar to go back to our Select tool. Next up, we're going to move to Station 2. So let's go ahead and go to that Scenes panel here. Now that you have your SketchUp driver's license, go ahead and go to your Scenes panel and click on Station 2, Thumbnail. And we're going to go back to using the Select tool. All right, so Station 2, and then close your Scenes panel here. Station 2 of our obstacle course is all about creating this really cool star shape. We're going to delete a few shapes to create this, and to do that, we're going to learn how to use the eraser tool and the select delete tools. So first up, let's zoom in a little bit. Use those zoom tools that we just learned. Move your cursor over this guy and either use your trackpad, slide 2 fingers towards yourself, or use that center scroll wheel to zoom in a bit. Now we're going to grab our eraser tool. And to get there, you can either tap E for eraser on your keyboard, or you can click this icon here, this little eraser. So your cursor should show this blue and white eraser, and now you can click and drag over these edges here. So when you click and drag over an edge, you'll notice that that edge was holding in a face, and it's no longer there. So this face here is being held in by this edge. So as soon as I delete the edge, it's no longer a full loop of edges, and so that face goes away. So click and drag over an edge to kind of keep carving out this space. So you may notice that when you click on just a face here, these white faces, that it doesn't delete. You'll actually need to click on the edge to make the face go away as well. If you do ever want to delete a face, you can use your Select tool. Again, go ahead and hit your space bar to get back to that Select tool, or this icon here, and you can select a face here. So you'll see the face is selected. It's indicated by those blue dots, and now you can click the Delete key on your keyboard. So that's how you would just delete a face. Select it by clicking on it with the Select tool, and then the Delete key on your keyboard. You can do the same thing with edges. Click on the edge and then delete. So there's lots of different ways to delete things. As you can see, you can select the edge, hit delete, another edge, delete, or the face. Either way, this is the shape that we are creating. So practice using either the eraser tool like this, or your Select tool, spacebar, and click on some of these edges to carve this star shape. I'm going to use my eraser tool, E for eraser, and here is where we're headed. We want it to have this star shape here. So now that we have the star shape, we're going to add some color to it. And the colors can be found over here on the right. This little checkerboard cube here, that's our materials panel. So let's open that up by clicking on it. And right away, you'll see a lot of different colors and images. These are all colors that are already somewhere in our model. So we'll see these later, but to find your own color, you can click on this little magnifying glass here to search. So here we have a lot of different materials, but what we're looking for is the colors category. So go ahead and click on colors and you can see some, maybe your favorite colors somewhere in this list. So let's go ahead and find a few different ones. My favorite color is green, so I'm going to select green. I know our background is green, but I just like it so much. I'm going to click on the green icon and then start to apply it to the faces here. So I can click on the faces and kind of make this fun geometric shape. So I realized that I accidentally messed up a little bit. And I'd like to undo that. So to undo, it's going to either be Command or Control Z. So I'm on a Mac right now. You might be on a Windows machine, but either way, it's Command or Control Z. So you can either do that, or you can click on this icon here to undo. So this is our undo, redo icon. So if you mess up and apply color to an area that you don't want to apply it to, you can click on this icon or use your keyboard shortcut, Command or Control Z. So I'm doing kind of an every other type of design here, and then I'll find something else. I like orange as well. Green and orange are kind of my favorites right now. So I'm going to apply it to those faces. So go ahead and choose some of your favorite colors. Yours does not have to look like mine. Maybe you want it all to be the same color. Just go ahead and have fun with it, and then we'll move on to the next station. So I'm going to scroll up here to the top and close this panel. I'm happy with the way this looks. Let's go ahead and move on to station 3. So open your scenes panel. We're going to do a lot of opening and closing of these panels. This scene's here. Go ahead and click on station 3. And don't forget to click your space bar. Right now, my paint bucket tool is still active, so I'm going to go ahead and hit my space bar so that I don't accidentally paint any of these faces. Now that I'm at station 3, I can close this scenes panel or I can leave it open. It's up to you. I'm going to close mine. If you like yours open, that's great. Either way works totally fine. So this station is all about closing a loop of edges and creating a cube. So what we're trying to do is create a cube sort of like this one with all sides on. So this cube has all sides that are existing, and these 3 on the left here don't have all sides. And so we need to figure out which ones, edges need to be drawn to close the loop so that it has all sides. I'm going to grab my line tool to create this, and that is this pencil icon over here. So this pencil icon or the letter L on your keyboard. So keyboard shortcut letter L activates the line tool. And so here you may notice that it looks like we're missing this edge here. And so with my line tool active, I can hover over this endpoint and a green dot appears. I can click on that dot and then move straight over to the opposite corner here, the opposite endpoint. Click and release, and you'll notice that these 2 faces are now healed. I can see that it was just missing this edge to create the cube. Now go ahead and do that with the other 2 here on the left. Go ahead and pause the video if you need. If you don't want the answer, it may be very clear to you which one, but this is good practice to see which edge is missing and how to draw a line from endpoint to endpoint. So if you're back, if you've already unpaused the video, you may know by now that this green dot here to this green dot straight up, that blue axis, heals that cube. Likewise over here, click and release, and then click and release to create the missing edge. So now we have 4 cubes that are healed and complete, and we can move on to the next station. So I still have my line tool active. I'm going to go ahead and hit spacebar. And if you want some practice before you move on to the next station, you can always click the undo icon here and then practice using the line tool again. So L for line, endpoint to endpoint, again, endpoint to endpoint. If you ever accidentally, draw it the wrong way, you can always undo that and do the right action there. So again, once you have these complete cubes, you can move on to the next station. First up, I'm going to hit my space bar so that I don't accidentally draw any extra lines or edges. So now I'm going to click on the scenes panel. If you've closed that, you want to go ahead and move to station 4. And this is probably my favorite station of the obstacle course. We're going to put together a puzzle, and we're going to do that using the move tool. So again, I like to close this panel to give myself a little bit more room. I'm going to use my zoom tool to kind of zoom in and fill my screen with these puzzle pieces. I'll even use my pan tool to move it over a little bit to the side. All right, so here is our puzzle. Our finished puzzle is this little pup here running through the ocean waves. So we're going to use our move tool to rotate these pieces and put it together. I'm going to show you one piece and then go ahead and pause the video and use the actions that I show you to put together the rest of the puzzle. All right, so we can see that this is the dog's face here. I'm going to go ahead and select it, so spacebar, and then select it, and I'm going to use my move tool to kind of move it over here to the right a bit. So that's this icon here, the little crosshairs, move here, and I'm going to click and release on that piece and just move it along the red axis. So you'll see that the color red activates, and that just means that I'm moving it straight over to the side. So I can kind of put that right here in the middle. And now I think I'd like to move this piece over here and put it next to the dog's face to the right, because that looks like where its tail is. You can see that here. So as I go to click on it, you may notice that this is still active. It's the selected piece. So to let go of that, I'm going to hit the escape key. So the escape key on my keyboard will let go of that. Now I can click on the endpoint and meet it up with the endpoint here. So I'm going to click on the endpoint and meet it up with that endpoint. So that's how I would move one piece. You want to make sure that you're strategic about where you grab these pieces. If I just try and grab it anywhere in the middle, I'm going to have to kind of eyeball it. And I don't want to move these pieces willy-nilly because it's not going to line up. I want to make sure I grab it by the endpoint, click and release, and meet it up with the other endpoint. Click and release. All right, so now let's look for this part here. It looks like it's probably this one, and you can see that it's actually turned a bit. If I put this piece here, it's not going to quite work, so I need to rotate it. I still have my move tool active. It's this icon here, or the letter M, M for move. Now, as you move over the pieces, you may notice that there's little red plus signs. So if I click and release on one of those, I can move it along the different tick marks and rotate this guy. So I'm going to rotate it right here so that the blue is on the bottom, the ocean is on the bottom of the sunset, and then click and release. And now it's into position so that I can move it. I can click on this endpoint of that triangle and then click on the endpoint here, meet up those two pieces. So if you're rotating something and you notice that it's really just moving really quickly, you want to make sure you swing wide with your cursor and move along those different tick marks. So click and release. Again, be strategic about where you grab. I'm going to grab this endpoint and meet it up with the endpoint. I don't want to grab it anywhere in the middle because then I'm having to move it and eyeball it, but instead grab it by the endpoint to meet up with the end point here. So use those tactics to move each piece into place, rotate them as needed to create this shape here. Go ahead and pause the video and come back to see me do it in a little bit more quickly. All right, so I'm going to pause for a moment because I have two pieces that I would like to move into place, but I want to move them at the same time. So instead of moving them one at a time, I can select both of them and move them as one. So I'm going to hit my select tool, which is my spacebar. I'll click on this one and hold down Shift, and I can add to that selection. So it's these two guys here are selected. They're both blue. And now I can, again, activate my Move tool, M for Move, and be strategic about where I grab this by the corner, and they're moving as one. So again, if you'd like to add to your selection, you can hit your Select tool, spacebar, and then hold down the Shift key. And that will allow you to add to what is selected so that when you move those pieces, they all move. So all of these pieces are selected and they'll all move together. I'm going to hit Escape to let go of that, and then Escape again to let go of those selections. And I'll keep putting together this puzzle. Did you do it? Good job. If so, and if not, that's okay. Don't worry about it. You can always pause on this station and move on to the next, return to it later. It's okay if you didn't finish it. All right, so I'm all set here. I'm happy with the way it looks. It looks like the scene over here. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next station. So go ahead and open up your scenes window. And what we're looking for is station 5. Station 5 is about using the tape measure tool to measure the size of something. So you can see that I have this makeshift ruler here, and we have our scale figure, Catherine, standing next to it. So let's go ahead and measure the size of Catherine, her height. And to do that, we're going to use our tape measure tool. So the tape measure tool can be found over here. It's this third to last icon, tape measure, or you can tap the letter T for tape. Either way, this is the icon that we're looking for. It's an icon of a little tape measure tool. So now we're going to hover over the bottom edge and go ahead and zoom in if you need to over this edge. I want to make sure we're on the edge and not the end point. The end point is going to give us a different function. So we're looking for the edge here. Click and release, and you'll notice there is a guideline, a dashed line that appears. And that's as we move our cursor up, that guideline moves with us. And you'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner that the height of it appears as well. So as I move it up, you can see I'm about 192 centimeters high, and down, the length of that is going to be 123 centimeters. So as I move, the length, the measurements box in the lower right-hand corner changes as well. So let's go ahead and measure Catherine's height. If I move over to Catherine, you may notice that the tape measure moves away from my ruler. It moves over here, and that's not what I want. I want it to go straight up and down that ruler. So instead of just moving away from it, I'm going to first tap my up arrow, and that will lock it straight up and down, or locking it to the blue axis. So now as I move over to the top of Catherine's head, it's staying put. It's staying locked in straight up and down to that ruler. So now as I go up to the top of her head, I can see that she is actually 166 centimeters tall. I'll click and release, and now there is a guideline right here at 166. So I can take my line tool and go to an intersection point, Click and release with my line, and now I've drawn a line right there at 166. Go ahead and mark your own height. So I'm going to tap T for tape to start another one. Hover over the bottom here and grab another guide line. Now, personally, I am 5'8". I live in the United States and we go by feet and inches instead of centimeters. So if that happens to be what you go by, you can type that in as well. If you happen to use centimeters, if you're using the metric system, you can type in the number of centimeters. So here, if you happen to be at 166 or 167, you can type that in and hit enter. I am at 5'8", so I'm going to type 5'8", and then the inches symbol, which is the little quotations mark. 5'8", enter. I'm a little bit taller than Catherine, and you may notice that that is at 172.7 centimeters. So that's how tall I am. I'm going to use my line tool, L for line, and mark that. That's going to be my height. This is Catherine's height, and this is my height. So go ahead and grab the tape measure tool, T for tape, and mark out your height. So straight up, if you need help locking it to the blue axis, locking it straight up and down, you can hit the up arrow to lock that in and then type in your height. Once you're done using these guidelines, you can go to this little eyeglasses icon here and choose delete all guides. And those guidelines will go away, leaving our marks there on our ruler. I'm going to close out of this display panel, done with my guidelines, and move on to Station 6. So back in my Scenes panel, Station 6. We're nearing the end. We've got a few more stations to go. You're doing great. In Station 6, we are going to be using the Push-Pull tool to bring a 2D shape into 3D. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of my Scenes panel here, zoom in just a hair, even pan over, get a better view of this area. All of these blocks here on the ground, all of these rectangles are going to be extruded to meet the height of the color-coded rectangles here on the wall. So to do that, we're going to use the Push-Pull tool. So I'm going to tap the letter P to activate Push-Pull, or you can use this icon here, and it's the top one, P for Push-Pull. So all of these red rectangles are going to be the height of the red line here, the very top of the line. All of the purple rectangles will be the height of the purple rectangle at 200 centimeters and so on. I'm going to start with my red ones. Click and release on the red rectangle and then hover your cursor over the top of this block here on the wall. And you'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner that it's at 280 centimeters. And that's what we're seeing here, 280 cm. Click and release to set it. Now again, I can do that with this red rectangle here, and you can either hover over the top of this mark or the top of the red extruded rectangle over here, the red extruded cube. I'm going to keep going with these red pieces here. Now we can also double click. So double click here to bring it up to the exact same height. Double click. If you're not sure if you brought it up to the correct height, you can always use your tape measure tool, which we just used in the last station. So click on the tape measure icon or the letter T for tape. You can click on the bottom of the cube, bring it all the way to the top, and you'll see that yellow measurements box appear at 280 centimeters. You can also see it in the lower right-hand corner. I'm going to hit Escape to let go of that. Or if you need to get rid of guidelines, you can click on this little eyeglasses icon here and choose Delete All Guides. I'm going to keep using my Push-Pull tool. You can tap P for Push-Pull or this icon here. You may need to orbit to see the different rectangles on the ground and the marks on the wall over here. Next up, I'm going to use the purple rectangles. So click and release on the purple rectangle here to bring it into a 3D shape. I'm going to bring it to the top of this mark here, click and release, and you should see the 200 mark also down here, 200 in the distance box. Now I can either double click on the next purple shapes, or I can click and release and hover over these purple columns here or the top of this mark on the wall. So go ahead and practice orbiting and panning to see the other shapes on the ground. So you can choose whichever color you want to work on next, but the pink one should match up with the top of the pink bar here. And you can double click and double click again. And if your double click isn't working, you may need to just simply click and release and bring it to the top of an adjacent pink cube. I'm going to do this again with my green cubes. I'll keep working, double click, or I can hover over, which is also called infer, to another green cube endpoint or edge there. Lastly, I'm going to work on my orange rectangles, click and release, and hover, and then double click. Now I've extruded all of the shapes to the corresponding marks on the wall. Again, if you are not sure if these are at the correct height, you can grab your tape measure tool and measure from the base up, and then check the mark on the wall. You can see the different corresponding marks here. All right, let's move over to our next station. Click on your scenes window here. We're going to move to station 7, which is this little house here. I'm going to hit my space bar to get rid of the tape measure tool so that I can think about my next move. In station 7, we're going to build this cute little house. So I'm going to minimize my scenes window once again and orbit a bit so that I have space to draw next to this house. So I orbited and then I panned over so that I can get my camera situated so that I have space to draw next to this house, but I can still see the house off to the right. So I'm going to let you know how big this little house is going to be, and we're going to draw it together. So to do that, we're going to use the rectangle tool, and that is this icon here, this top one. You'll see your cursor change to a rectangle with a pencil, or you can tap the letter R on your keyboard. Either way works. We just need to get to the rectangle tool. Now, I'm going to click anywhere in this open space over here to the left of this house. So anywhere on the ground plane, click and release, and then move your cursor up and to the right. So we're drawing on the ground plane, and now we're going to type in the dimension. So it's really important that when you start, you click and release and move your cursor up and to the right. So if you look in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the measurements changing. And we can either click and release to set it, or we can type in the dimensions that we would like. And for this, it's going to be 200 by 300 centimeters. So I'm going to type 200, comma, 300, enter. And that's going to be 200 by 300 sized rectangle. Now that we have our rectangle, we're going to extrude it to the same height as this guy over here. So I'm going to tap my push-pull. We just used the push-pull tool in our last station. So P for push-pull, or this icon here, and click and release on that shape. Now we're going to move it up to 200 centimeters high. So I can either hover over this corner here. We just did that in the last station, so hovering over, inferring to another point. Or I can type in 200, enter, to bring it up to 200 centimeters high. Now we need to create this roof line. So I'm going to tap L for line. Remember creating those lines in that third station, I believe. We're going to hover over this edge here and find that blue dot. That's going to be our midpoint. Click and release. So we have the line tool. You can also click here. Click and release on that blue dot, midpoint, and then come over here to the opposite blue dot. And that's going to create a line right down the middle so that we can create this roof line like you're seeing over here on the right. Now that we have that line, we can hit our space bar, select tool, click and release on that center line so that it turns blue. So we selected that center line. Now we're going to move it up and you'll start to see your house take shape. So click on the move tool here, or the letter M for move. So because this is pre-selected, this is blue, it's going to allow us to just move that center line. So we can see that as we move it side to side, it's making kind of a funky house. But if you hit that up arrow on your keyboard, it's going to lock it in straight up and down. We're going to move this up 75 centimeters. Or you can hover over the roof line next to it. So you can either type 75 enter or click and release on this edge here. So looking kind of similar, you can orbit a bit to take a look at how you're doing, but the center line should be straight up and down. Hit that up arrow and then hover over here and make sure that it's 75 centimeters high from this point. So I'm going to hit my space bar as I think about my next move so that I don't accidentally move this anywhere else. I'm going to draw a rectangle, and this rectangle doesn't matter how big you make it, just make it about the size of the door. I'm going to grab my rectangle icon here or tap the letter R on your keyboard. Click and release on this edge, and then click and release somewhere over here so that it's about the size of a doorway. Now let's click P for push-pull or this icon here, and we're going to hover over this doorway and push it back just slightly. Click and release. Now I'm happy with the way my house looks. It looks a lot like the one on the right. Let's go ahead and hit spacebar so we don't accidentally push-pull anything else. Now we have our select tool active, and we can move on to the next station. You're doing great. This next one is going to be the last station. So back to our scenes, station 8. Station 8 is a really fun one. We get to get really creative with this area to the left of our schoolhouse. So pretend that you go to school here in this little tiny schoolhouse and you want to create a special feature to make the outdoor area really fun. So to do that, I'm going to head over to the 3D warehouse. So I'm going to close my scenes panel and search for something in the 3D warehouse. So if you click on this little stack of cubes, you'll probably see something like this, and click on your 3D warehouse icon here. So we're looking at components, and here next to my school, I want to add a pool. I would love to swim at recess at our break. So I'm going to type in pool and then enter. And what I'm looking for is a 3D model of a pool. And I may need to type in swimming pool, but I'm going to look for something that looks pretty fun. I can click forward on this page here and take a look. There are so many models in the 3D warehouse. So I'm going to type in swimming pool to be a little bit more specific. And I think I'm happy with maybe this one here. And you can search for whatever you like. So I'm going to click and release to set this down. The move tool is automatically active. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this corner and move it just like we did with the puzzle piece right up against my schoolhouse so that when I get out of school, I can jump right in to this pool. Once I'm happy with the placement of it, I'll hit spacebar and then click out into some space next to it and orbit a bit and take a look at how my schoolhouse design is doing. So feel free to add whatever you think would be fun next to your schoolhouse. Search for it in the 3D warehouse. If you're not loving whatever you find, you can always select it and then hit the delete key, just like you did with this star exercise over here, and then download something else. So there's lots to look at. Go ahead and have fun with it. You can also use the undo button. All right, so let's go ahead and close out of that. I'm happy with the way my swimming pool is looking. I'm going to go back to my scenes window, go all the way to the bottom, and click on my well done scene. I made it through all of the stages of the obstacle course, and if you did too, really good job. You deserve a trophy. If you need to go back to any station, you can always go back and click on any of these thumbnails and work on those stations. Give yourself a really big pat on the back for working through these with me, and I hope you had fun.